In this section, we're going to talk in detail about equity-indexed annuities. Equity-indexed annuities are probably the main reason why annuities in general can sometimes have a negative connotation in the public. Equity-indexed annuities pay huge commissions to the insurance reps who sell them. They're often they're not advantageous really at all to the client. And a general rule of thumb is the higher the commission to the rep to sell an insurance product, the better it is for the insurance company. The surrender schedules on products like this are extremely long. There are all sorts of horror stories that I know of where clients were kind of, for lack of a better word, they were hustled into this type of product. They've got a 10, 15, 20-year surrender schedule, very low flexibility, very low upside, lots of benefits to the insurance company. Our company, the Trinnell Financial Group, has a policy that our financial advisors cannot sell these types of products to clients. But you're definitely going to see these types of products out there in the marketplace. You'll run into clients and prospects who have them. So you definitely need to understand how they work and also how to sell against them. There's some key terminology that you need to be familiar with when analyzing equity-indexed annuities. You'll also hear these referred to as fixed-indexed annuities. They do offer principal protection, so your principal can be guaranteed. They allow you some sort of participation in different market indexes, hence the name fixed indexed annuity. So you can have some exposure to the S&P 500, the Dow Jones, the Russell 2000, the NASDAQ. You name an index, there's probably a way to invest in that index inside these products while offering a principal guarantee. But as you can imagine, no company is going to give you free rein on all these indexes and a principal guarantee without opposing or imposing some sort of restriction on your growth. The restriction of that growth in conjunction with the long surrender schedules is what makes these products so unattractive and why we don't use them with our clients. The first thing I want you to understand is cap rates. So for example, to make it really easy to talk about, let's assume that your client has a statement of an equity index product, and let's say that the money is 100% invested in the S&P 500 index. So it's all just in one index, and let's say that you see on the statement that they're invested in it with a, let's say, 4% cap. Simply put, that's the most they can earn on that money in a given year. Now they can't lose money, but it's the most they can earn. Some caps are very low. Some caps get as high as 8, 9, 10%. Just depends on the company and what other restrictions are being imposed. So if a client is investing and the S&P 500 goes up, let's say 10% in a given year, well, their account is only going to be credited 4% because that's the cap. So the cap rate is the maximum amount they can earn in that index. Now, point taken that if the market goes down, they're not going to lose anything either. If the products were that simple, where there was some sort of reasonable cap with no downside, that wouldn't be such a bad product. But they layer other restrictions into these products. One of the restrictions is a participation rate. They often use participation rates in conjunction with cap rates. And you'll see there's some other things they're going to use as well. Let me explain how a participation rate works. Let's say that you've got a client still 100% in the S&P 500, with a participation rate of 50%. So if the S&P goes up 10%, they're only participating in 50% of that gain, so their account is going to be credited 5%. But oftentimes, you're going to find people who have a cap rate and a participation rate. So if someone has a 50% participation rate with a 4% cap, that means that even though the S&P went up 10%, their participation rate got them 5%, but because they're capped at 4, they only get 4%. So I'm using just simple math and simple illustrations just to get you to understand how these work. Participation rate and cap rate are two different types of numbers, and oftentimes they're used overlapped with each other. Now these products get even more complicated than this. This is where it really starts getting interesting. Let's say, for example, that you've got January, February, March, and April. January, February, March, and April. You got 4 months. Let's say that you're working with a product that has a monthly point-to-point averaging method that has cap rates and participation. It's easier for me just to show you this than to try to explain it. So a monthly point-to-point, so here we are, we've got a few months here to use as examples. And whatever those points are for those 4 months, we're going to average them. And then with that average, we're going to apply a participation and a cap to that indexing method. So let's say that we have a monthly point-to-point with a 1% monthly cap and a 50% participation rate. And again, these are extreme examples because I want you to see it. A monthly point-to-point with a 1% cap and a 50% participation rate. In January, let's assume that the S&P was up 3% in that month. So the S&P 500 index was up 3%. They're only participating in 50% of the upside. 50% of 3% is, of course, 1.5%. But they're not going to get 1.5% because they're capped at 1% a month. So their account gets a 1% credit. Now in February, let's say the S&P has another great month. S&P is up 5%, which is a fantastic month. But again, participation rate is actually 2.5%, and again, they're capped at 1%. Now in March, the S&P goes down 3%, and in April, it goes down 2%. When the index goes down, they receive a neutral credit, so there's no gain. Now, what needs to happen is all those points need to be averaged. And here's where the downside really happens for the client. They only get to count the 1% cap in the good months. They don't get to count 0 for the bad months. They have to count the downside that the index actually received. So if they receive 1 and 1, -3, -2, the average of those four numbers is simply 1 plus 1 minus 3 minus 2 equals -3. Divide that by 4. That's an average return of -0.75. And you can't lose money in these, so they're not going to make it a negative balance. But because it's negative, the net return to the client is actually 0 for this example. The S&P 500 was up 3, was up 5, so it was up 8, and then it was down 3 and 2, so it was down 5, went up 8, went down 5. The net return of the S&P was actually +3, but because of the way it's indexed and the way they restrict, the net return was 0. Because when you average the point to point, they're taking the downside of the S&P against the upside of your caps, and you can see that it's really hard to make money with these products. Now these are extreme examples, but I've seen plenty of cases, like last year, 2013, the S&P 500 was up like 30%. A good equity index product was only up maybe 6% because of all the caps and all sorts of stuff. And that's an extremely good year. So, given the long surrender schedules that these companies have, given all the complications to the different indexing methods, they're just not easy products to use. There's really no guaranteed growth whatsoever. Some products offer a modest guaranteed interest rate of like 0.5% or 1%, but they're just not user-friendly, and they definitely tend to benefit the insurance company more than the client. And that's why we have a very strict policy not to use these types of products. But I certainly want you to understand them so you can sell against them. You're going to run into many cases where a client may be talking to a few different financial advisors, you're being one of them, they're sniffing out the best advisor to work with, who they get along with, what they're recommending, and they may say, hey, I've met this other advisor, he's recommending XYZ fixed annuity product or equity indexed product. Is that a good thing? And you're going to be able to say, well, it certainly guarantees principal, but it's not going to give you, very much growth, very hard to make money, very restrictive. Let me walk you through how this works. And then you'll explain them the way I just showed it to you, and they'll see that it's not very advantageous to them. Again, this is a very complicated product, a lot of moving parts, a lot of things to understand. Watch this video a few times, absorb the information, and we're of course here to help support you and help you fill in any gaps in your learning process. This is very complicated stuff, but this is a good foundation for you.